story. I'm joined by British political commentator Tom Gross. Tom, thank you very much for joining us here in studio. Now, the BBC's Match of the Day, Gary Lineker has since then deleted his post, but the damage is done.
Yes, it is, because first of all, he's not just anybody. May I remind people, football is the world's biggest game, biggest sport. Britain has the world's most popular football league, and Gary Lineker is the public face of that league, both as a former footballer and now as the presenter of the BBC's flagship programme. He is the highest paid person of any kind working for BBC, getting public funds. So he has millions of followers on Twitter, on X, and he already was criticised last month for retweeting something from The Guardian suggesting that Israel was carrying out genocide. And there's also people pointing to his hypocrisy. For example, in the Qatar World Cup, the last soccer World Cup, he went to Qatar. He received £1.6 million in consultancy fees from Qatar, which does not have a good human rights record and plays host to the Hamas leadership and partly funded the October 7th massacre. And he also commented on the match between Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and England. And on the exact day that he was commenting, and the days before, Iran was shooting dead women on the streets for not wearing a hijab, and he said nothing about it. His tweets are only directed against one country, Israel, and he is being accused of anti-Semitism by the British Jewish community, and I think at the very least he needs to do some soul searching and some education about what Israel is and about Jews. That anti-Semitism.
Since then, he's deleted that post. But tell me, what have been some of the reactions from these members of parliament and Jewish rights groups that were able to pursue him in deleting that post?
Well, there was a very good article actually in the Times of London yesterday by its main sports commentator pointing out that the tweet he retweeted also accused Israel of apartheid and saying, Gary Lineker, do you know anything about Israel? Do you know that two of the top players when Israel did very well in the Under-20 World Cup a few months ago were Israeli Arabs from Maccabi Haifa, and millions of Israeli Jews and Arabs cheered on those Arab players? Does Gary Lineker know that 25 different Israeli Arabs have played for the Israeli national football team? So what's he talking about with apartheid? And also, in terms of anti-Semitism, I would point out to Gary Lineker, is he aware where boycotts lead? Does he know anything about what happened to Jewish soccer players in the Holocaust? You have dozens and dozens of top players. You have the first player ever to score for Poland in history was later murdered in Auschwitz, Jewish. One of the few players to score four goals in one match for Germany. He was killed in Auschwitz. The manager of the leading Italian team of the 1930s, Inter Milan, he was also killed in Auschwitz. So Gary Lineker, it's being suggested, needs some serious education before he tweets or opens his mouth again in anything to do with Israel or Jews.
The people calling for Israel to be expelled from international sporting competitions are using the example of the Russian teams at the onset of the Russia-Ukraine war. But what I want to ask you, is that a correct comparison?
Well, I don't think so. Look, I personally, in fact, can I remind people, Russia isn't necessarily banned as such. For example, there's the Australian Open tennis going on right now with lots of Russian players. They simply can't have the word Russia or the Russian flag next to their names. They haven't been banned. But also, look, Russia invaded a sovereign country in an unprovoked way, Ukraine. Israel is doing its best to root out terrorists who have repeatedly fired rockets at Israel for 20 years and carried out, as we know, the most horrendous massacre. And whatever Gary Lineker, whatever information he may be getting, yesterday, for example, the president of the Czech Republic, who is a former army general himself, was here in Israel, and he knows something about the military, and he said he's never seen such a humane action by any army. He was involved in Afghanistan, he worked for NATO in Afghanistan, Iraq, and so on. So maybe Gary Lineker and critics in Britain and the West should do a little bit more educating of themselves rather than just believe whatever some protesters are screaming and shouting on the streets of London.
Do you think that education can help in this situation?
Well, I hope so. Obviously, people have to have an open mind. But yes, I mean, otherwise we're all lost. If people can just tell lies consistently and smear people, then God help us. But I'd like to think there is a kind of big, silent majority that is open-minded and fair-minded, and they're being misled. If they're told repeatedly that nobody's killed more civilians in world history.
Tom, I want to ask you briefly just before we go out for a break. We've got about a minute and a half. After Turkey's decision to deport Israeli soccer player Sagiv Jiziket, who expressed solidarity for the abductees, which is not something so controversial, now another Israeli player for Turkey is also facing disciplinary action.
Well, it's not just disgraceful of Turkey, it's disgraceful of all those people who said Black Lives Matter in the last 2 years. They've been taking the knee before soccer matches in Britain and many other countries. I think the Israeli player was saying, well, Jewish lives matter too, and he has actually been arrested and charged by the Turkish police and then deported. So it's disgraceful. People in Britain like Gary Lineker should be having solidarity with Israeli football players.
There are rules and measures in FIFA against mixing sports and politics. Why are we not seeing any action against Turkey? Very briefly, please.
Well, I guess money. FIFA's very politicized. Saudi Arabia has essentially bought the next the 2034 World Cup, even though they have no real history of football. Qatar bought the last World Cup and Russia the one before. So I'm afraid FIFA is up to here with corruption of every kind.
Of course, and when money is involved, it's very easy to turn the other way. Tom Gross, Jaco Lack, thank you both for joining me today.